Porygon moves first, uses Tri-Attack, and finishes the fight. Speedrunner 0218 wins the race with a time of 58 minutes and 26 seconds, proving that he is really a speedrunner. For me, losing that race was so frustrating. After all, it is my job to play Pokemon Yellow. I also pride myself with relentless optimization, refining, and approaching my work as scientifically as possible. My goal is always to get excellent results. So failing to win was a major disappointment to me. So much so that I continued to grind on Porygon until I finally got the best time, even if it didn't count as a win because the competition's deadline had already passed. Of course, there was a cost of pursuing the best Porygon results, and yeah, I fell behind on a bunch of other projects for the channel. Without my video editor, Sean, I probably would have missed a bunch of video releases. I think it's appropriate to say that in that scenario, I was obsessed. After all, I thought that it would all be worth it. All this work was going into my dream video, because when I first started watching Pokemon solo challenges by the likes of JRose11 and Madrybread, I visualized in my mind the day that those two might race each other through a Pokemon game. My Versus videos were my first attempt to bring that vision to life, and the Porygon Race video was my next attempt. At the time that I was creating it, I thought that it was undoubtedly going to be a success. It was the realization of my vision, and I thought that it might just be a valuable and novel contribution to the solo challenge community and format. Well, that's really not how things played out. On the night before the video was gonna go live, the follow-up video accidentally released. I was asleep, so it took me forever to catch the mistake, and by the time I did, the damage was already done. When the main video released the next day, it was the worst performing video of my entire 2022. And this felt really bad because it was the project that took me the most number of hours out of any of my releases. Over 200 hours of my work fizzled like Hypnosis missing Magneton. I was honestly crushed. However, if you've been around this channel for any length of time, you'll know what I do when I'm met with defeat. I analyze, optimize, and of course I try again. So, on June 22nd, 2022, as a follow-up to the Porygon race, I announced the Parasect Race. It was a chance to once again go head-to-head with the likes of Vanman and Speedrunner 0218. This time, for my chance at redemption. I knew that if I strategized, optimized, and planned well enough, I could win this one. Obviously, we're almost halfway through 2023 now, so you might wonder, what happened? Here's the story. So when I made the announcement for the Porygon video, about 20 to 30 people showed up in the Discord server that I had made, and only 6 of them ended up submitting footage for the actual competition. I figured that announcing Parasect would basically be the same, maybe like 20 to 40 more people would show up. But this time, over 200 people showed up in the Discord. It was quite overwhelming. I had to get all of these people using GameHook, my overlay software, and the Universal Pokemon Randomizer so that they could actually play the challenge. Believe me, many hours were spent troubleshooting. After all that work, the competitors were ready, so let's do a quick overview of some of the notable names. I'll leave links in the description to all of their channels because many of these people are also hardworking content creators. I really urge you to check them out if you want to see other awesome Pokemon content. First up is the winner of the Porygon race, Speedrunner 0218. He's here to defend his title today. Of course, the runner-up from that race, Vanman, is also back. I was the third place finisher, so both Vanman and I are hoping to unseat Speedrunner to take the title today. In addition to these names, there are also other people that you might know. Gym Leader Matt, Andrew Davis, Doc Fuzzum, Kangastan, Steve M. Plays, and Battelle the Assistant. By the way, you're probably going to ask, what about Paraspector? I did send him an email about this competition saying it would be great to have him participate, but unfortunately the scheduling didn't align, so we won't be seeing him here today. In addition to these names, there were also a bunch of people that I had no idea who they were competing, so here are some of their names, and I'm really hoping that I'm pronouncing these correct. Zeem, Red Ranger Ween, Pum, Ant Shield, Langa, Etzlan, Autotonsorialist, Zelda Fan, Marcus, Uran10, Quirky Quasi, Alexa, Cronast, Bananen, Gigalechu, and more. Needless to say, I think that this race is going to be much more competitive than the last one. And that leads me to a question that some of you might be thinking by now. Why choose Parasect for a race? Well, it's a final stage Pokemon, so each run will hopefully not take too much time to complete. I wanted to make sure if you joined in, you could do a single 1 to 2 hour playthrough on the weekend and submit the footage, getting a brief feature in the video. Also, Parasect as a Pokemon just lends itself to this format. It has some good stats, at least good when we consider all the terrible Pokemon that I do runs with. It has 60 HP, 95 attack, 80 defense, 80 special in Generation 1, and unfortunately its worst stat is its speed stat. It has 30 speed. That gives it about a 5.86% chance to crit in Generation 1, so at least it's likely that no one's going to win because of their critical hit luck. Supporting those stats is its move pool. It starts with a normal move, Scratch, a status move, Stun Spore, and a bug move, Leech Life. This one is going to be really important later on, so keep it in mind. Through Level Up, it learns Spore, Slash, and Growth, and through TM and HM, it learns Swords Dance, Toxic, Body Slam, Double Edge, Hyper Beam, Mega Drain, Solar Beam, Dig, Mimic, Reflect, Bide, Rest, Substitute, and Cut. I want to just quickly mention some of the standout moves here. Of course, Spore, which is its signature move, is the best sleep-inducing move in Generation 1. That's because it has 100% accuracy. The only way that it can fail is if it gets a Generation 1 miss, which is a 1 in 256 chance. Because this move is so good, I assume that everyone is going to be using it on their moveset. It seems like getting rid of it would not be a good choice. The unfortunate thing though is that Parasect is still probably going to be moving second against most of its foes. Luckily, it's going to be able to shore up this weakness with the badge boost glitch triggered by moves like Growth and Swords Dance. Its Bug, Normal, and Ground moves get damage boosts from Swords Dance, and its Stab Grass moves are going to get boosts from Growth. The fact that it gets access to both of these moves mean that there are 3 potential routes that I think are likely to be chosen by competitors. Number 1, using only Swords Dance. Number 2, using only Growth. Or number 3, using both Swords Dance and Growth together. I am really curious to see how other people decide to play this Pokemon. Which strategy is going to end up getting the best results? Well, that's what this video is for. We are going to find out. Parasect, luckily for all of us, has a medium fast growth rate, so we don't have to deal with the drudgery that is the slow growth rate. And finally, I really need to mention Parasect's type. It is Bug Grass, and quite frankly, this is one of the worst possible type pairings in Generation 1. It's weak to Flying, Poison, Rock, Bug, Fire, and Ice. And it has double weaknesses to 3 of those types: Flying, Poison, and Fire. Unfortunately for all of us, that is going to be a major problem. So in summary, Parasect is a good Pokemon for a race because it has good stats with bad speed, an amazingly flexible move pool, and a terrible typing. I am very curious to see how it does. But first, this race needs a set of rules. Because it was played back in 2022, we're going to be using my rules as they stood back then. I've made small adjustments since, so let's go over them just so everyone is on the same page. Rule number 1, we can only use our starter Parasect in battles. Rule number 2, we can't use any items in battle except balls and dolls. They are only allowed in wild battles as well. Rule number 3, no overworld glitches, exploits, or RNG manipulation. Save states are also banned. And rule number 4, TM32, which is double team, is banned until Parasect reaches level 100. Additionally, I should make clear that competitors were allowed to play as many playthroughs as they wanted within a 5-week period. And competitors could share amongst themselves as much or as little information as they wanted. This led to some people teaching other people how to get better at the game, and others just saying nothing until very close to the deadline. It was quite interesting seeing how this sort of like Lord of Flies dynamic played out behind the scenes. And I'm going to talk about that later so that all of you get a bit of a window into it. So now with all of that out of the way, we need to get a sense for the race course. What is the terrain that each competitor is going to have to navigate? I want each of you to deeply appreciate the decision making that all of these players made. So let's jump into my first playthrough with the Zombie Mushroom Bug. And here I'm going to make note of all the key areas where decisions have to be made. Also, I'll make sure that I explain any relevant game mechanics so that those are clear. Alright, so let's get into it. First up is the battle against the rival in Oak's lab. Now, of course, it's very important to note that this footage was filmed a long time ago, almost a year ago, so of course my overlay does not quite look the same. Now, another small quirk is the fact that my Parasect does not have full health. This is because I was still using a GameShark code to set my DVs to perfect values, which did not update my current HP. Anyways, by the time the race actually happened, everyone's Parasect was being set to the proper values by the software. Also, this battle is not hard for Parasect at all. The only way you could possibly lose here is if you just spam Stun Spore over and over again. After delivering Oak's parcel, I head to Viridian City and straight to the Mart. Here, I want to pick up healing items that'll be useful for the rest of the playthrough. After that, I head north into the forest and begin by fighting the first bug catcher. He's quite simple, I just use Scratch the entire time and take a victory. After that, I'm going to fight the second bug catcher as well. I'm doing this mostly for levels, because I don't think that I'm going to be able to beat Brock on minimum battles. There are only 2 more bug catchers in the forest, and I'm going to fight both of them, and by the time I defeat the last one, my Parasect is only level 9. So I stick around in the forest to do a little bit more training, and also catch myself a Pidgey before I head to Pewter City at level 10. Inside Brock's gym, I fight the junior trainer. The experience from this battle takes Parasect up to level 11, and now I am ready to take on the rock-type gym leader. Alright, so it might have been more advisable to go up to level 13 for this fight, but the one thing that I do have as an advantage for Parasect is the fact that it knows Leech Life. Now, both ground and rock do not resist bug moves, so this is dealing neutral damage. And with Parasect's decent base attack, it's actually doing a lot to the Geodude, and I'm also healing some health per hit. This allows me to knock Brock's first Pokemon out, and I still have green health left over for the Onix. Honestly, I was a bit surprised by this because I thought that Parasect was going to need at least level 13. But I think I'm actually going to be able to get this done, because I can use Leech Life to deal damage to Onix, healing myself a little bit each time I hit. Then when Onix goes for Bide, I can just use Stun Spore to paralyze it. Now if it fails to attack because of the status condition, that will actually stop it from using the current Bide, and it will just start using other moves. That's what happens here, and then Brock does use a full heal, but it's really weird in Generation 1 because even though you've healed the status condition, this does not restore the Onix speed, so now Parasect is moving first, and I'm able to take the victory. Alright, so that is a 7-minute and 12-second Brock split on my first attempt, and honestly, that's quite good for Parasect. It doesn't seem like the rock-solid Pokemon trainer is going to be an issue for it. So, it's time for Route 3, and I'm very conveniently showing you the footage here against youngster Ben. Now, as you will know, in my modern videos, I actually have custom art for him, but when I was filming Parasect, I did not have custom art, and the reason that I actually commissioned it was because of how bad he is for Parasect. The Ekans knows Poison Sting, it's also faster than Parasect, and this move does 4 times damage. It takes me down to about half health. Luckily, Leech Life is super effective, so I do a lot of damage, heal, and as a result, I am going to knock it out. But do remember that this thing knows the move Wrap, so that's another way that he could have defeated me. With that out of the way, all of the tricky trainers on Route 3 are complete, so now I'm going to head into Mount Moon. Now there are 2 mandatory trainers at the very end of the cave, the Super Nerd who has a Coughing which knows Smog, again it's a poison move, does 4 times damage, and then we have Jesse and James who have both an Ekans with Poison Sting and also a Coughing with Smog. Now the Super Nerd's Coughing goes for Smog against me, and it does so much damage, more than half. Luckily, I'm able to finish it off and move on to Jesse and James, but I can imagine this guy being a problem for a lot of competitors. Also, Jesse and James, the Ekans is faster than Parasect. It goes for Poison Sting right away, doing about a quarter. Luckily, Leech Life heals me, then it goes for Wrap, which is annoying. It hits Poison Sting 1 more time before I take it out. Next is Meowth. Now this thing does have Growl, so right away it lowers my attack stat. That is a bit annoying. Scratch is really not doing very much to it, and as a result, it is able to take me down to orange health before the Coughing comes in. Luckily, first turn, it goes for Tackle, doing very little to me. I take it under half health with my second hit, and then with his second and third turn, it uses Smog, doing 4 times damage to Parasect, and I am very lucky because I just barely survive. So I did it. I've cleared Mount Moon with no resets. Alright, so in Cerulean City, I think there's a very obvious choice. As a grass type, I should probably face Misty right away. However, right in front of her is this trainer. She's a junior trainer who has a Goldeen. I call her the Pecking Goldeen trainer, and that's because this Goldeen has Peck, which does 4 times damage to Parasect. Now, in recent days, she has also got custom art, and that is specifically because of these playthroughs with Parasect. She's awful. Luckily, though, today, I get some good luck. I don't hit myself in confusion on the final turn, and I do take the Goldeen out with no resets. However, I will note now that that's not going to be how this fight goes most of the time. Just wait. Okay, so now it's time for Misty. I'm going to explain this fight just once, because honestly throughout the rest of this video, I am not going to talk about her very much. Because she has good AI, the Staryu can only use Tackle against you, and Parasect's base 80 defense is more than enough to shrug off weak normal type hits. Also, every time I use Leech Life, I gain back some health, making it even easier to finish off her lead. However, up next, of course, is her Starmie. Now, Stun Spore can be used to cut this thing's speed if you really want, but it is also only going to attack with Tackle, and Leech Life is a bug move, so it's super effective against Starmie's Psychic typing. Here, I am gaining back even more health, and as a result, I finish the fight against the second gym leader with green health. Okay, so now let's proceed towards Nugget Bridge, because the rival is next. Now, I mentioned the Pecking Goldeen in Misty's gym, but this Spearow that he leads with also knows Peck. First turn, it goes for it, and it does more than half to my level 19 Parasect. I miss Stun Spore because this move only has 75% accuracy. Spearow goes for Growl, lowering my attack. I do less than a third with Scratch. And now I am not set up for success in this fight. So the thing about this Spearow though is that it's not always going to use Peck because he doesn't have good AI. Just because of that, I am able to defeat it in this first attempt and move on to the Sandshrew. However, things against it can get worse because it can use Sand Attack and lower your accuracy. Then after it, I'm just not hitting enough and the Rattata is able to finish me off. I was hoping that I would get better luck in my second attempt against him, but I get even worse luck, and this time the Spearow finishes me off. Okay, so hopefully third time's the charm. This time the Spearow goes for Leer. Yeah, it's also faster than Parasect, making matters even worse. Luckily, I get a Scratch in without my attack being lowered, and it does about half. However, then it uses Growl, and that means I need 2 more scratches to finish off the rival's lead. Luckily, it doesn't even hit a single peck. Alright, so I have a lot of health left over for the Sandshrew, and while it is a bit annoying with Sand Attack, I managed to take it out, retaining full health for the Rattata. It goes for Quick Attack, I miss Leech Life, I actually miss a lot of Leech Life, but then when it finally hits, I do so much damage, and as a result, I'm able to finish the Rattata off and move on to the Eevee for the first time. Since I got hit by a couple pretty big Quick Attacks, I want to restore as much health as is possible. I use my last Leech Life PP to heal, and then I finish the Eevee off, so I did it. I cleared this section of the game, and I do have to say that I got very lucky. We will see why as this video progresses. After taking care of Nugget Bridge, I walk back to Cerulean City. By the way, in Pokemon Yellow, you can't use the escape rope in Bill's house, so this walking is mandatory. Outside of the city, I take on the Rocket. He's quite easy for Parasect to finish off, and then he gives me the TM for Dig, which I can learn. So I might as well teach this move right away because it's base 100 power in Generation 1, and that is a huge upgrade over Scratch. Unfortunately though, I am not going to be able to use it against Sandy, who is the next trainer that I like to talk about. She has 3 Pidgeys, and all of them know Sand Attack. That's where she gets her name from. Unfortunately for Parasect, the best move to use here is Scratch. And at my current level, which is 23 over a damage rounding threshold, I am not anywhere close to getting the 1 hit. Luckily, I actually get a really rare critical hit on the second Pidgey, knocking it out in 1 turn, and then the third one just goes for Gust, so they didn't use their signature Sand Attack. I am totally fine. With that, I head on to the SSN. I'm going to be safe in this first playthrough and pick up the TM for Rest. After that, I grab Body Slam, which is going to be an amazing upgrade for Parasect's Scratch. And then I head into the Gentleman's Quarters because I want the rare candy. He's got 2 fire types. Growlithe, which is an easy 1-hit with Dig, and then he has Ponyta. By the way, this thing is faster than Parasect, so it gets to use Ember. I was so worried because this is a move that does 4 times damage. However, Parasect is over-leveled enough, it survives, goes for Dig, and finishes the Ponyta off in a single hit. Alright, so with that thrilling battle out of the way, I have earned myself the rare candy, and now I can take on the rival. In most playthroughs, by the time you get to the fight against him here, your Pokemon is over-leveled enough that you can just one-hit all of his Pokemon, but again, Spearow is still faster than Parasect. Like, this thing is so slow. Luckily, my defense is pretty high, so Peck doesn't actually do that much damage to me, and then Body Slam gets the one hit. After that, this battle gets much easier. I one hit the Rattata, get a lucky critical hit on the Sandshrew, taking it out in a single turn, and then Body Slam just barely doesn't have the range to one hit the Eevee, but I knock it out on the next turn. Alright, so now it is time for Surge. I said that Misty was quite trivial, and honestly, Surge is also trivial. My type allows me to resist his electric attacks, and I also have Dig, which is super effective. Even when the Raichu gets a critical hit like it does here, Thunderbolt doesn't even do half to Parasect, and then my Dig almost gets the one hit. Obviously, that doesn't matter though, I shrug off his next hit and finish Raichu anyways. Alright, so of the 3 first gyms, all of them are actually quite easy for Parasect. I'd say Brock is the hardest, and maybe Surge is the second hardest, with Misty being extremely trivial. What is very surprising is that all of the other trainers are tricky. There's Youngster Ben just after Pewter City on Route 3, then there's the Super Nerd and Jesse and James in Mount Moon. After that, in Cerulean City, you have a choice between 2 trainers that have Peck, the rival on Nugget Bridge, or the Goldian trainer in Misty's gym. Then just before Surge, the gentleman who has Ponyta can hit you with a super effective Ember. I think this is one of the reasons I like Generation 1 so much. A lot of the random NPCs regularly cause problems for the Pokemon that you're doing a run with. Now, the Wrapping Glass is usually one of those trainers, but in this case, bug moves are super effective against grass and poison types, so I'm doing 4 times damage here, and I'm able to one-hit all of her Pokemon. With her out of the way, I head into Rock Tunnel, and here I want to mention something about Parasect that is quite awesome. It has great PP. Body Slam, Leech Life, and Dig, and I could have also had Scratch in the place of Stun Spore just for a little bit more sustain. In general though, because I have so many moves that are good and deal damage, I'm just not going to have to visit the Pokemon Center very much, and that'll allow me to save some time. Alright, so how is the self-destructing hiker? Well, he's quite easy, and that's because Parasect has access to Dig, which is super effective against all his Pokemon. After clearing the cave just past Lavender Town, I have to face this mandatory gambler. He again has 2 fire types. This time the Growlithe is faster, so it hits Ember, taking me to half health. Luckily, Dig 1 hits. Then he sends in Vulpix. It goes for quick attack. Probably would have just been faster than me anyways. Yes, it is. It tries Tail Whip, but then my Dig hits and I knock it out. Can imagine him causing some problems occasionally. So with all of that out of the way, Parasect has now made it to the mid-game. Normally the choice that I like to talk about here is which vitamins do I choose to buy. After all, at this point you've stockpiled enough money to buy somewhere between 2 to 5. Obviously this is a playthrough that I did a long time ago, so I'm not going to go into depth with my choices here, but this will be important for all competitors because a choice is going to have to be made. And that choice is to either boost your attack, your special, or your speed. All 3 theoretically have their merits, so I'm curious to see what ends up being the choice of most competitors. Next, I decided to go to Pokemon Tower, and here I face the rival. Now you might think that his most terrifying Pokemon is his Fearow. After all, it should have a flying type move, but no, it has actually lost Peck for this fight, and the only flying type move that it has is Mirror Move. The rival does have good AI, so he's just going to spam this the entire time. And then after that, he does have 4 more team members, but they're all quite bad, so Parasect takes an easy victory. Next in Pokemon Tower, of course, is Agatha Jr. She has 2 Ghastly, and in this case, my Parasect is not faster, gets hit by Lick and paralyzed right away. Luckily, I do have Dig, which is super effective and more than enough to polish off these weak ghosts in a single hit, so no reset here. However, I can see this area of the game being problematic for other players in the race. So now let's head up to the top floor of the tower to face Jesse and James. Now while the Meowth is going to be a one-hit, it moves first, allowing it to lower my attack with Growl before I finish it off. Next is Arbok, but it only goes for Bite and I take it out. Okay, so now let's take on the Weezing. And you know what really surprised me here is the fact that it moved first against Parasect. It hits Sludge, doing absolutely massive damage, taking me down to red health. But Dig's just gonna one-hit, right? Well, no, it is not. It actually only does half. which is very concerning because then the wheezing knocks me out. I have to reset, and this takes me way back just after I had defeated the rival. I have to make my way back through Pokemon Tower up to the top floor, and this time I save. Obviously, this is just my first playthrough, so this is not my race submission, but I have a feeling that Jesse and James could be very problematic. This time, after having my attack lowered, I do not one-hit the Arbok, and I get paralyzed. This fight is worse than I was anticipating. So since I can't one-hit the wheezing, it's probably going to be a 3-hit in this case. I'm going to use Spore to put it to sleep. I get very unlucky here with paralysis, but then I just get very lucky and wheezing uses Tackle, doing very little to me. I go for Dig, but wheezing moves first, hits Smog, and Parasect goes down again. It is not a good sign when you are losing to Jesse and James in Pokemon Tower. And the losses don't stop quite yet, because I lose one more time. Finally, in my 4th fight against them, I am able to take the wheezing out and earn myself a victory. And with it, I am off to Erica's gym. I figured that as a bug grass type, I might as well take her on early on, earn myself the Mega Drain TM, which could be useful for recovery. Also, I can do some training in her gym just to level Parasect up a little bit more. Okay, so without further ado, let's take on the 4th gym leader. Erica leads with Tangela, and here Leech Life is super effective. I put it to sleep first with Spore and then knock it out with 3 hits. Next, she sends in Weepinbell. I figured this thing would be easy to knock out because Dig can do a lot of damage and Leech Life actually does 4 times damage. But in this case, it moves first, hits Acid, which is super effective, and then I remembered something. She has good AI, so her second 2 Pokemon are only going to use this poison type move against me. Dig fails to get the 1-hit, and Weepinbell knocks Parasect out. Alright, that's unfortunate. Another tricky one. I guess we are going to have to use Spore here. I put the Weepinbell to sleep, then I use Leech Life, and in this case, it actually gets the 1-hit. Okay, so I've made it to the Gloom. Now, I should mention here that both it and the Weepinbell are outspeeding Parasect, like the Tangela is too, but it's pretty useless. As a result, things could be challenging against the Gloom. Also, Parasect isn't able to one-hit, but I do manage to pull through in this fight. With that, I've opened up the way to Cycling Road. This area is actually going to be interesting for the playthroughs later on, but not right now. I complete the Safari Zone, head to Sylph. Of course, I'm going to pick up the items on the 10th floor, and then I head down to the 7th floor with the card key in hand and obtain Swords Dance. And here is where I had a realization about the mid-game. Remember when I said there is going to be a choice between using Swords Dance, Growth, or Swords Dance and Growth? Well, you can obtain Swords Dance before you obtain Growth. After all, I'm only level 36 right now and I can teach this move, but I am quite a ways off of getting Growth at level 48. So even with this new incredible move, the run is going to get pretty brutal from here. I tried to fight the rival in Sylph, but my level is just too low at this point, so I decided to go to Koga instead. I wanted to outspeed the Venonat, use Spore, put it to sleep, and then set up Swords Dance, but it poisons me first because yes, it is faster than Parasect. As a result, the poison damage is too much and Parasect ends up going down. I tried to see what the damage range on Body Slam would be, and not inspiring. So with a second loss, I think it is now time to use some rare candies and take Parasect up to level 40. This allows Parasect to move first against the Venonat and put it to sleep right away. So now I can set up Swords Dance, and after that I should be able to sweep with Body Slam. Unfortunately though, the second Venonat is faster than Parasect, so it poisons me with Toxic. Body Slam gets the knockout on it, Koga sends in his third Venonat, it hits Psychic, which doesn't do very much, and I finish it off. Okay, now it's time for the Venomoth, and this thing is scary specifically because it knows Leech Life, which does 4 times damage. However, in this case, I have Surge's badge, which means my defense stat got a boost, and as a result, Leech Life does very little damage, I hit Body Slam, and Koga is defeated. With his badge, Parasect now gets a 12.5% boost to its speed stat, which is sorely needed, and I also get access to the ability to use Surf outside of battle. This allows me to head to Pokemon Mansion, grab some extra vitamins. I also go back to the department store and buy more as well. At the time, this was a typical routing choice that I was making in my playthroughs, and since then, I have decided that it's really not the best idea. It sometimes works if you're playing with a terrible Pokemon, like maybe Execute or something like that, but in this case, I don't think any other participant is going to end up doing this. With that out of the way, I head back to Sylph to take on the rival. I teach Mega Drain in the place of Body Slam, so I have an answer to the Cloister. This time the Sandslash doesn't poison me, I put it to sleep. I'm able to set up Swords Dance, and then start my sweep. Dig one hits his lead. Next is Cloister. I put it to sleep just for safety and then knock it out with 2 uses of Mega Drain. And after that, this fight gets much easier. Now, you might be worried about his final Flareon. However, with Koga's badge boost, I'm able to outspeed it and just one-shot with Dig, so no issue there. Up next is Sabrina, and yeah, she is going to cause problems for Parasect because she's faster. However, today she uses an X-Defend on the first turn, and I just put the Abra to sleep, so I'm not going to get hit by Flash. This is going to allow me to set up Swords Dance, badge boosting my speed, but even then I am not outspeeding the Abra after 2 uses, and it still hits a Flash. I put it back to sleep, set up Swords Dance one last time, and now I finally outspeed and I'm able to knock the Abra out. Cadaver's next, it hits Kinesis, lowering my accuracy even more before I finish it off, but I still hit and make it to her final Pokemon, Alakazam. It goes for Reflect, I go underground, Dig hits, and with that, I have defeated her. However, it seems like this battle is mostly a coin flip. I think we should all be very curious if anyone's going to come up with a consistent way to get through her. But now, we have reached the point in the run where things are going to get really frustrating. Up next, of course, is Blaine. And here's why it's frustrating. He leads with Ninetales, it's faster than Parasect, it knows Flamethrower, immediately goes for it, and knocks me out in one hit. Now at the time of filming this, I didn't realize how awful it was, and that's because Blaine doesn't have good AI. So this Ninetales only has a 1 in 4 chance to use its Fire-type move and one-shot Parasect. As a result, it is likely that you will just put the Ninetales to sleep with Spore because he chose a different move and then set up with Swords Dance. However, after I knock the Ninetales out, he sends in Rapidash, and like its name suggests, it's faster than Parasect. It goes for Growl, which is, I guess, fine, because then Dig gets the one hit. I move on to the Arcanine, and strangely here, I am faster than it. So that means his fastest Pokemon is faster than Parasect after 3 turns of setup, but both the Arcanine and the Ninetales are not. As a result, I'm able to one-hit with Dig, and Blaine is defeated. However, you all should believe me right now. I'm going to talk about this fight a lot later on, so just keep it in the back of your mind. Now, of course, in Yellow version, Giovanni is going to be fairly awful for any Pokemon that is slow. The Dugtrio is going to outspeed me. Probably a lot of the Pokemon are going to outspeed me, let's be real. However, the Dugtrio is important to mention because it has Fissure, which is a one-hit KO move. It tries to use it here on the first turn, but it doesn't successfully work. I really should explain the mechanics of one-hit KO moves in Generation 1 because they are not the same as they are in later generations. In modern games, the accuracy of these moves actually changes dynamically depending on how many levels above the target your Pokemon is. However, in Generation 1, the game only checks the speed stat. If the user is higher than the target, then the move is allowed to hit. In this case, the move just has base 30% accuracy, and that's it. So this Dugtrio has a 1 in 4 chance to use Fissure, and then if it does, it has a 3 in 10 chance to actually hit you with it. Today though, Giovanni doesn't actually put up a fight against Parasect, and I am able to take a victory against him on my first attempt. There's only one more trainer before the league. It's the rival on Route 22. I expect this fight to be quite easy. I set up with Swords Dance on the first Sandslash, and then when I defeat it, I level up to level 48, and now I have a chance to learn Growth. At this point, I had to make the choice if I wanted Swords Dance, Growth, or both of them together, and since Growth is able to trigger the badge boost 6 times, as well as increasing the damage of Mega Drain, which is also a recovery move, I figured that it would be the better choice. So I delete Swords Dance and continue with the battle. By the way, for this run, I'm actually using an older version of my overlay, and you'll notice that I forgot to change Swords Dance to Growth, so whoops, I am sorry about that. There is a lot of old tech on display for this video. Of course, up next is Execute. I can put it to sleep and then set up with Growth. This maxes out both my attack and my special stat, and after that, this whole fight is extremely easy. Now, because setup with Parasect is very important, I use 1 rare candy, taking me up to level 50 before I take on the league. So Spore, Growth, and Mega Drain in combination are obviously going to make Lorelei very easy. The only risk here is getting hit by a stray ice move like Ice Beam, Ice Punch, or Blizzard, and then being frozen. In this case, I make it all the way to the Lapras without getting hit. Now I leveled up during the fight, which means I am not as fast as it, so it does go for Blizzard, but it doesn't do very much damage because of my setup. There's no freeze, and as a result, Mega Drain knocks it out. Okay, so let's move on to this guy between Lorelei and Agatha. Obviously, he's just a hiker. There should be no problems today. Onyx goes underground, does a little bit of damage with Dig. I put it to sleep, and then I set up with Growth. Like, I might as well play safely. It hits Rock Slide doing a bit. After all, this move is super effective. And then it hits a second Rock Slide, and this one does so much damage because of a critical hit. But Parasect hangs on with 6 hit points. Okay, I am set up now, so I might as well use Mega Drain and heal my health back. The only thing that could go wrong is the Hitmonchan freezing me with Ice Punch. It doesn't. After that, I sweep through the rest of his team and make it all the way to his ace, Machamp. Strangely enough, this thing was actually a little bit scary because it used Strength and got a critical hit. Luckily for me though, Parasect easily survives, and I finish it with a second Mega Drain. Alright, now it's time for Agatha, and I don't really have much to report here. As long as you've held on to Dig up until this point, there shouldn't really be an issue. Also, Spore in combination with Growth can be used to outspeed all of her Pokemon, so I'm not really worried here. The only problem is that I have to knock the Golbat out with Mega Drain, and yeah, it has a double resistance to Grass-type moves, so this takes a while. However, with Spore and Growth, I am able to get it done, and after that, I sweep to a quick victory with Dig. Alright, so Lance is next, and here I'm using again Spore, Growth, and Mega Drain to knock out most of his Pokemon. I also am keeping Dig around. It is really good against the Champions team in Yellow version. However, that creates another problem, because against the Dragonite, I am not able to knock it out and I run out of PP on Mega Drain. As a result, that's a reset. So there is a solution to this. I can teach Mimic to Parasect and then steal Ice Beam to sweep Lance's team, but I had to decide which move to get rid of, and in this case, Dig makes the most sense. This slows down, knocking out the first Gyarados and the first Dragonair. However, once I get to the second Dragonair and I Mimic Ice Beam, the sweep is ensured. Alright, so with that out of the way, we have now made it to the final battle in the game. Let's take on the champion. Learning Mimic in the place of Dig is okay because against the first Sand Slash, which is only going to spam Poison Sting, I can set up Spore and Growth and then Mimic Earthquake. I have to say, the Poison status is very annoying in this fight, and that's going to play out in all future runs that we see today. Every time you get poisoned, it just wastes time because it plays the animation and depletes your health by a little bit. However, if you're using Mega Drain, then you're just going to gain your health back, so the status doesn't matter. It is just there to annoy you and add a few seconds to your time. Now in this case, you might think the Parasect has a few other problems here, most notably the Cloyster with Ice Beam. However, in this case, my badge boosts are set up, I outspeed, put it to sleep, and then I can just easily knock it out with Mega Drain. However, the issue is actually the fact that Parasect levels up going into the Flareon. This allows it to move first, hit Fire Spin, which combos to disastrous ends with Poison, and then it goes for Flamethrower, knocking me out. Okay, so that was not good. I've actually used all of my rare candies to this point, so I'm not going to be able to prevent this mid-battle level up. However, with Growth setup, I know that I'm going to survive one of Flareon's hits, allowing me to go for Spore, put it to sleep, and then I can knock it out with whichever move I mimicked. In this case, I mimicked Stomp from Exeggutor just because I didn't want to get poisoned against the Sand Slash, but overall this is not a very good idea. Still, in combination with Spore, it is enough to get the job done, and I clock in with Parasect for the very first time. It finishes the game in 1 hour, 21 minutes, and 5 seconds with 12 resets at level 60. This took 4 hours and 38 minutes of game time. Obviously, these results aren't very good for a modern run on my channel, but put side to side with some contemporary results from the time, I think that Parasect did alright. Granted, it faced so many major hurdles, and I'm going to summarize them now. The first issue is how to prepare for and defeat Brock in the fastest possible way. Then defeating youngster Ben on Route 3 is going to be an issue of outspeeding his Ekans. Mount Moon presents an optional area for more training. After all this though, the next section of the game is absolutely brutal. At the end of the cave, Jesse and James have 4 times damage with both Ekans and Coughing, the first of which outspeeds Parasect in some situations. Then you have to face the Pecking Goldeen or the Pecking Spearow in Cerulean City. However, once Parasect has cleared this section of the game, it's sort of off to the races because it obtains Dig, Body Slam, likely Spore, and it takes a quick victory over Surge and stomps its way through Rock Tunnel. On the other side, the mid-game choices start to stack up. Pokemon Tower with the annoying Ghastly trainers, or Erica with her 4 times damage in the form of Acid. The next choice is between going to Saffron City to obtain Swords Dance, or attempting Koga without it. Remember, every time you backtrack from an area of the game, it is wasting more time. If you can visit an area only once, that is going to be the optimal play. However, whichever road the competitors chose to take, it all leads to Blaine. He is essentially the mid-game boss of the run. Ninetales is fast, has 4 times damage, and it has a guaranteed 1-hit on a reasonably leveled Parasect. Beyond that, the run gets significantly easier. Giovanni, Lorelei, and Agatha all could cause resets. Of course, Lance has an Aerodactyl with 170 speed, which knows Wing Attack and Fly, both moves that deal 4 times damage, so a solution is going to be required there. With him out of the way, the champion isn't particularly challenging. Flareon can deal massive damage if you level up at the wrong moment and get outsped, but other than that, this team isn't particularly strong, which is actually sort of a nice surprise for a yellow playthrough. Usually the champion is quite bad. So I think a lot of you are probably quite impatient by this point. Scott, let's just get on with the race. So it's that time. Let's see how everyone else's playthroughs with Parasect went. At the start of the race, it became immediately apparent that people were taking very different approaches. Some, like Gym Leader Matt, stayed entirely quiet, keeping their cards close to their chest. I took this approach as well because I felt that holding on to the information that I was gaining from my testing would give me an advantage against the other competitors. A problem that I had had very close to the deadline with Porygon was that I didn't really have a satisfying finish already in the bag. So going forward with Parasect, I wanted to clock in with a great time early on. As a result, I decided to first develop a safe route that would allow me to clock in and have at least one run in the bag before I tried to add more risk into my strategy in search of a fantastic time. Of course, there were many other competitors like Gym Leader Matt and myself who decided to stay quiet about their strategies, but there were also some other players who decided to give advice freely. Speedrunner 0218 was one of these players. I noticed him giving advice about how to face Brock early on. So now I think it's time to start examining the results that competitors got when facing Brock and weigh the different approaches that we have to each in-game obstacle. So first of all, we need to start by ruling out levels that aren't going to work for this style of competition. Obviously, anything above like 15 is just way too high and it will take too much time. So here we can see our player Nashi. He's going to fight all the trainers in Viridian Forest, level up to 10, backtrack and heal in Viridian City, and then fight the rival on Route 22. Now the reason a player might want to take this strategy is because then the rival is going to choose Jolteon as his final evolution, not Flareon. The fire type that he'll have in the champion battle is Ninetales, and its only fire move is Fire Spin, which is really inaccurate and kind of bad. It's a lot easier to deal with than Flareon, who has Flamethrower as well as Fire Spin. Unfortunately though, at level 10, this fight against the rival is pretty brutal. Spearow's Peck does so much damage, and then Eevee can finish you off, causing 2 resets for Nashi. Unfortunately for him, having these resets early on isn't going to give a competitive time. However, let's switch over to Batel the Assistant's run, because she figured out a strategy which will make this fight a bit more consistent. By using Stun Spore against the Spearow, you can cut its speed as well as its consistency, making it much less likely to hit with a peck. Also, the fact that you're outspeeding means that this is actually turn neutral. You are not actually losing a turn by going for Stun Spore. Well, unless you get unlucky and get a miss. Also, I do want to acknowledge the work that she put in for this challenge because she submitted 3 runs, each one facing a different team from the rival. By the way, this run where she faces the Jolteon team is not her best result, so keep that in mind when you see the splits for Brock later on. I'm going to be doing this more in the video, occasionally showing footage that are not the competitors' final submissions, and it's just going to help me tell the story a little bit better. I'll try to flag this footage when it shows up. Now, let's switch back to Nashi's footage because the extra experience from the rival brings his Parasect all the way up to level 13 to face Brock. This is over a damage rounding threshold, and it gives Parasect a 5 hit on Geodude, which isn't possible just one level lower at 12. At this level, Parasect also has no problems against the Onix, so this is the most consistent approach that we are going to see in this video. However, that consistency comes at a price. In this case, Nashi clocks in with a time of 9 minutes and 38 seconds. So that is not a particularly competitive split. So what about level 12? Well, this just isn't a good choice. Of around 30 submissions, I only received a single entry with someone defeating Brock at level 12. And if you look at the time, you're going to quickly notice that this isn't a normal Parasect run. We are seeing a novelty playthrough. And believe me, we're going to talk about his approach later on because it is absolutely priceless. So now let's switch to Marcus's footage and talk about the most common level to fight Brock at, which is level 11. This footage is a good example as to why level 12 just doesn't work. If you fight all of the early game trainers, except the rival on Route 22, then Parasect just naturally arrives at Brock at level 11. In order to get level 12, you have to spend additional time fighting wild Pokemon, and that just doesn't make sense, especially when level 12 does not actually increase Parasect's damage significantly for Brock. One reason you might want to level up is if it decreases his damage because your defense stat increases, or if you have more health and that just barely allows you to win, but both of those scenarios aren't the case with Parasect. So level 11 is just faster. So now I think that we should examine this case scenario. Here's some footage from Adair defeating Brock with a level 11 Parasect. The Geodude takes one more hit when compared with level 13, but Parasect is still able to move on to the Onix with green health. The Stun Spore full heal speed interaction can be utilized to move first against Onix. What this prevents is Brock endlessly trapping Parasect in bind and doing way too much damage. After all, health is a resource that needs to be carefully managed in this fight. Another way to do this is spamming Stun Spore every time Brock chooses to use Bide. After all, the Onix's speed is cut from your initial Stun Spore, so you can move first after Brock chooses this move and take no damage. And that's what we can see Adair doing here. Other players like Pum also took this approach. After all, it seems to be logically the best option available. Honestly, if I did a playthrough with Parasect today, and it was my first attempt, I would probably do exactly this. However, Generation 1 wants to deliver more excitement than that. When I tested Brock after my first playthrough, I made some mistakes and accidentally used Leech Life against Onix when it was using Bide. Here's the thing about this move, in Generation 1, it is so janky. So I'm not entirely sure how this is working internally in the code, but I'm going to do my best to explain what happens. If Leech Life does 2 damage, we expect Bide to pay back double, which would be 4. Easy math. Bide will last 2 to 3 turns, so it should deal somewhere between 8 to 12 damage if I spam Leech Life. However, we're going to watch Red Ranger's footage here where his Parasect Nasu faces Onix, and here's what actually happens. Turn 1, Onix goes for Bide, Stun Spore misses, Bide accumulates no damage, Stun Spore hits on the next turn, paralyzing Onix, and then Red Ranger chooses Leech Life. It does more than 1 damage, evident by the health bar depletion, Onix unleashes energy, and it only does 2 damage back to Parasect. So here's what we discovered. Leech Life is also healing Parasect, and this damage is removed from Bide's counter. It's almost like the game is calculating the difference between Onix's health and Parasect's health at the end of the turn, and then adding that to the counter. So if Parasect deals 2 damage and heals 1 damage, then Bide will only pay back 2 damage. But since Parasect is healing using Leech Life while it attacks, the net loss here is only 1 HP per use of Leech Life. Strategically, this has implications. You only need to use Stun Spore once to cut Onix's speed for the rest of the battle. After that, just spam Leech Life for maximum damage. The Onix choosing Bide here is actually an advantage because then the turns go by faster. Bind, unfortunately, is the worst case scenario because it traps you and the screen shakes, which is very annoying, costing frames. Tackle animates the health bar, which Bide only does once for several turns. And Screech lowers defense, which can be devastating and cause some losses when the damage from Bind or Tackle starts to stack up. Now, as the competitors are facing Brock at level 11, Leech Life is going to run out of PP, but this doesn't actually matter because Scratch is enough to finish it off anyways. This gives Red Ranger a 641 Brock split. So this time is dramatically better than the times that were produced at level 13. And honestly, it is quite consistent. So this brings us back to Speedrunner0218 and the Discord server. Most of the players were saying that they face Brock at level 11, and then contrary to this, he chimed in and said that he faces Brock at level 10. This really surprised me, because when I had first tried testing at this level, it did not go well. So now let's jump into Speedrunner's footage and see how he prepares for Brock. First, he faces the last at the beginning of the forest and then the first bug catcher, but notably skips the second and third one. The two fights that he skipped are really annoying because the trainers have Metapod, which really slow things down with the use of Harden. Cutting this one battle out means that when he faces the junior trainer in Brock's gym, after he knocks out the Diglett, Parasect levels up to level 10, and then the Sandshrew does not level it up to level 11 before he faces Brock. Now I'm sure you're going to guess what I'm about to say next. Yes, level 10 is a damage rounding threshold, and that means Parasect takes the same number of turns to knock the Geodude out as it would have at level 11. Going into the Onix, Parasect levels up to level 11, then he uses Stun Spore and spams Leech Life. After it runs out of PP, Scratch finishes the Onix off, just as it does with the other strategy, and Speedrunner clocks in with a ridiculously low time of 5 minutes and 3 seconds. To put this in context, that is almost cutting the time the level 13 split had in half. However, the level 11 Brock split isn't too much slower, so in most cases players choosing this strategy still are getting decent times and are still in this race provided that they can find time savings later on. For example, Vanman chose the level 11 strategy to defeat Brock, and in this case, it earned him a 5 minute and 28 second split that is only 25 seconds slower than Speedrunner. Another player, Ike the Killer, chose to face Brock at level 11 as well, and he got a 5 minute and 20 second split, which is actually extremely good. Well done. Adair gets a time of 5 minutes and 53 seconds. Doc Fuzzum gets a time of 5 minutes and 49 seconds. Pum gets a time of 5 minutes and 43 seconds. Marcus a time of 5 minutes and 51 seconds. Uran10 gets a time of 5 minutes and 52 seconds. Zeldafan got a time of 5 minutes and 49 seconds, and Kangastan gets a time of 5 minutes and 52 seconds. All of these results were produced with the level 11 strategy. So now let's see what results come from the level 10 strategy. Auto Tonsorialist gets a time of 5 minutes and 12 seconds. This is only 9 seconds slower than Speedrunner's time. Gym Leader Matt gets an even better time of 5 minutes and 8 seconds, only 5 seconds behind Speedrunner. And I'm sure you're all wondering at this point, what strategy and what time did I get? Well, I chose to use the level 10 strategy, and my time was 5 minutes and 7 seconds. So I'm 1 second ahead of Gym Leader Matt and 4 seconds behind Speedrunner. So let's review the results from the first split of the race, and so far, Speedrunner has once again produced the best one. I was actually surprised how far back Vanman was at this point in the game. He is 26 seconds behind Speedrunner. However, he invested in more training earlier on into the game, and that isn't the worst thing in the world, and I'm going to explain why in a second. However, before that, we need to check in with everyone else in the race. I divided this graphic up very specifically to highlight these 4 groupings of times. Anything under 6 minutes is a very competitive time and is in the running for one of the top spots. However, anything over 6 minutes is just starting to slip too much early on. Now, the way that solo challenges work is that as the game progresses, there are more and more chances for the player to make small mistakes like bumping into walls or selecting the wrong move, and as a result, it is usually the case that if you start off with a bad Brock split, you are not going to be able to come back into the race later on. So unfortunately, it is time to say goodbye to all of the players here. However, I do want to take a brief moment to mention everyone who had a split that was over 7 minutes against Brock. Thank you so much for still submitting footage to this race. It is just so great having more people all together playing Pokemon Yellow. I'm going to give a special shout out here to Andrew Davis, who also makes solo challenge videos on YouTube. His content is a lot shorter than mine, so if you don't want to watch huge bloated videos like this one, go and check out his channel. And so now all of the players are going to have to journey out onto Route 3, and here waiting for them is a boss much scarier than Brock. It's Youngster Ben. Here I'm going to insert a montage of a bunch of my failed attempts against him, and while that plays, let's talk about why this battle is so bad. First of all, he starts with Rattata, and I'm not showing it on screen, but it does no tail whip, so it can lower your defense before the Ekans comes out. Then because the Ekans outspeeds, it can hit you with Poison Sting for 4 times damage, or trap you with Wrap indefinitely. Essentially, if it just decides to Wrap on the first turn and never decides to use a different move, you just lose. There is nothing you can do. Now if you actually get a chance to attack, you can use Stun Spore to cut the Ekan's speed, or you can attack with Leech Life, recovering some health. I don't have good news to report here though. Out of all of my fights against Youngster Ben, I think I was winning about 50% of them, and in some cases I actually got sub 5-minute Brock splits, then Youngster Ben would just finish me off, and those were some of the most painful restarts I have ever had. Because of the format of this race and the fact that we had 4 weeks to put together our playthrough, no one with the top times is going to lose to Youngster Ben, so I just had to explain this so that you would know the pain that we all experienced, and also just how nervous we all were going out onto Route 3. Just remember that he's a trainer where anyone's playthrough could fall apart. And with that out of the way, I think we should head back over and talk about Van Man's approach to the next section of the game. Here, I will briefly mention the fact that being at a higher level in the early game for Brock does make Youngster Ben slightly easier. You'll have a little bit more health and a little bit more damage, but overall it doesn't dramatically change the fight. Alright, so while we watch Van Man's footage, let's talk about the Discord server dynamics that we're developing. In contrast to the advice about gameplay that Speedrunner was giving, Van Man chose to share advice about how to set up technical aspects of the challenge, specifically turbo fire buttons. By the way, these are allowed for the competition, and everyone was encouraged to use them. Unfortunately, some people like Ike the Killer weren't able to get them working, and he said that he was sure that they wouldn't help that much. By the way, we are going to have to revisit this later on. Other than sharing this technical advice, Van Man stayed quite quiet about his own strategy. It was at the point that people were starting to report the times they were getting, and everyone was starting to be a little bit more open about the late game and the mid game, and I started to get very curious about what Van Man was up to. And as time started to pass, I got a little bit more insight. There was a discussion happening in one of the Discord channels, and people were weighing in on who they thought was going to win. Steve M. Plays said confidently that he thought Van Man was going to take the race. And he also provided a little bit of insight as to why that was the case. He said that he was working with Van Man on making the perfect route. I became very curious about this, noticed that the two were hanging out in a Discord call, and so I joined in to briefly ask them some questions. I was honestly surprised at how forthcoming they were, because they showed me a giant spreadsheet that they were making with all of the experience yields from every battle in the game, meticulously written down to verify exactly what level Parasect would be at every single fight. This sort of attention to detail is something that I know to expect from Van Man's video editing. After all, he's basically the inventor of the door transition that you see in all of my videos now. I feel like every time I watch one of his videos, I learn something new about this genre, and I'm always trying to incorporate those things into my own videos. Honestly, I just feel like a lot of his videos are masterpieces. Please go and check them out. So because they had shared a little bit about their strategy, I figured that I should probably open up and share a little bit about my own. I said that I was trying to produce a very consistent result so that I could do multiple playthroughs per day and get a decent time early on in the competition. Van Man replied that they were working on a route that would be able to achieve the theoretical best time. Once they had completed their work figuring out all of the details, then all that was left for them was just to play the route and get the time. They did, of course, admit that this route would require luck at certain stages of the game, but that would allow them to cut so many optional trainers. Van Man figured that because they had about 3 weeks left over to film this route, that there was ample time to wait and get the luck that was required. From here on in, I'm going to refer to this as the Van Man route because honestly, it is going to be very important for this entire competition. And so now, as he enters Mount Moon, let's talk about the downsides to this route. Essentially, what he is trying to do is get all of the luck to converge in a single playthrough so that he can get through the early game with the best possible time. So he wants to get minimum encounters on Route 1, minimum encounters in Viridian Forest, and of course as few encounters as is possible in Mount Moon. Now this competition was played before I implemented my change to my overlay that removes encounters in Mount Moon. I specifically did this because of Parasect, and I'm going to talk about it a lot more later on. For now, I just want you to know that in Mount Moon, Vanman would just reset his entire playthrough and start again if he got too many encounters in here. Of course, if you look at the timer, this only sacrifices about 7 minutes of time, so it isn't the end of the world. You can just start all over and hope for better luck. After all, he only needs one run. His route through the cave has him grabbing the rare candy, fighting the last with the Oddish and Bellsprout. After all, Leech Life does 4 times damage to these grass poison types in Generation 1. That brings his Parasect to level 15, and then he goes up against the Super Nerd. Look at his time. This fight started before 8 minutes. Now I really need to emphasize just how impressive this is, because the Discord server had started to realize how important the encounters in the early part of the game were, and we started to talk about the times exiting Mount Moon. This became known as the Mount Moon split. In my own play, if my timer was above 9 minutes and 40 seconds when I exited Mount Moon, I would just restart and hope for a better attempt. So right now, Vanman is about to achieve an incredibly fast Moon split. And then, Coughing hits Smog, poisons Parasect, and polishes it off on the next turn. You are going to ask here, why didn't he just save? Well, when you have 3 weeks left to produce the best possible results, you don't want to submit a run that has a reset in it this early on. So, if you won't accept a reset, then saving would just be a waste of time. The reveal here is that we have not been watching Vanman's final submission since Route 3. This was an earlier attempt that just didn't make it. And believe me, with his strategy, he restarted many times. However, not everyone restarts when they lose to Jesse and James. Both Zeem and Speedrunner fall victim to their team. However, in Speedrunner's case, he had such an advantage from the Brock split that he isn't completely out of the race. However, he has now lost his first place spot. But a lot can change in the next section of the game, because it is time to enter Cerulean Hell. We know the choice that every player has to make. Fight either the pecking Goldeen trainer in Misty's gym, after all she's basically a free win once you can get through that fight, or they have to face the rival who has 4 Pokemon, and the first one is a Spearow which knows Peck. So let's examine both of these options in detail. The Vanman route takes Parasect into Misty's gym, avoiding the rival battle as long as possible. But this means he has to defeat Goldeen at level 17, which is under a damage rounding threshold, and this fight is very unreliable. This is one of the concessions his route makes. Most of the time, he is going to fail here, but sometimes the Goldeen is paralyzed, fails to attack, and Parasect is able to defeat it. Since Brock, he has only faced one additional trainer, and that's the reason that his Parasect is at such a low level. Of course, the battle against Misty is very easy just because of Parasect's typing, so he doesn't have to worry about it. After defeating her, Parasect is level 19, and then he uses a single rare candy to take it up to level 20 over a damage rounding threshold. Then, he heads straight for the rival on Nugget Bridge. I'll note here that this footage is unedited, and yes, he did skip this save as well. He has not saved once in this entire playthrough. Before I discuss that though, let me mention the rare candy, because it really helps with the damage ranges in this fight to make things more consistent. While Vanman does take a massive hit from Peck on the first turn, the rival fails to do much else to Parasect throughout the rest of the fight, so he clocks in with a rival 2 split of 10 minutes and 59 seconds. With that victory, Vanman's run has officially started. That means that before the next difficult opponent, he is going to save the game. Now, as he heads out onto Nugget Bridge, I really want to take the time to mention that what you have watched seems so buttery smooth and like the perfect solution. It's like, why wouldn't you do it this way? Well, because you can fail over and over and over again at this section of the game. After Vanman and Steve M Plays had finalized the route, Vanman had started to stream his attempts, and believe me, he was not getting by Cerulean City in very many attempts. So I think now it's important to contrast his riskier approach to this section of the game with the approach that I took. At this point in my strategic development, I was thinking of this route as the Parasect Nuzlocke. I wanted it to be that consistent. In the Discord server, a bunch of players had started to report their results, and Steve M Plays was managing a leaderboard of all the best times. However, no one had done a reset free run yet. So let's look at the strategy that I took in Cerulean City to give me the most possible consistency. I knew that once I cleared this area of the game, things would get significantly better. So solving the battles here, balancing for both consistency and speed, was my hardest challenge. Defeating Brock at level 11 gives a little bit extra experience, which is important. Then I would heal before Mount Moon, because I'm going to fight a lot of extra trainers in here for levels. The bug catcher left of the entrance, the bug catcher beside the rare candy, the last just north of him. This brings Parasect to level 16 for the super nerd. And when his coughing goes down, Parasect is level 17. Of course, I take the dome fossil. This may be footage of my 27th Parasect attempt, but I still have my priorities straight. Okay, so here's why those extra trainers mattered. By the way, I'm fighting 2 more trainers than Van Man at this point. Now, against Jesse and James, my Parasect is speed tied with their Ekans, which really changes the fight. I played around with a route where I used 1 rare candy before this fight to outspeed, but that ended up not being quite as good overall. Either way, a tie is significantly better than being consistently hit first. Also, more levels help with the damage that I do and surviving the attacks that they make. Now, the reason I didn't use the rare candy is because when Parasect defeats the coughing, it levels up to level 18. This is important because then when I grab the second rare candy of the run in Cerulean City, I can use both of them to take Parasect immediately up to level 20. And then I can fight the rival, bypassing the Goldeen trainer entirely. I made this choice for a couple reasons. Every one of the Goldeens moves are awful to get hit by, like truly awful. I cannot describe to you how frustrating it is to fight her with a Parasect. Tail Whip ruins your defense, Peck does so much damage, and then to top it all off, Supersonic messes up your consistency. Additionally, if you've been hit by Tail Whip, you do more damage to yourself when you hit yourself in confusion. So while there is only a 1 in 3 chance that she hits you with 4 times damage, that doesn't really feel better because if she hits you with Supersonic or with Tail Whip, it also feels bad. While Supersonic does have trash accuracy, it might be one of the worst moves in the game. When the opponent is using it and you have to 3 or 4 hit their Pokemon, it's consistent enough. So now let's contrast that with the rival's Spearow. It's a much better matchup for Parasect. He doesn't have good AI, so it only has a 1 in 4 chance of using Peck. Also, its other moves don't synergize nearly as well as the Goldeens do. Leer is basically useless, Fury Attack is not very good, and Growl is really annoying, but it isn't a run ender. Unfortunately for me, I did get a single reset here today, and my rival 2 split is 11 minutes and 5 seconds. Granted, I haven't fought Misty yet. However, that's by design, because then after Nugget Bridge, Parasect is level 23 when it has to face the Goldeen trainer. The increase in HP and defense makes this a much more straightforward victory. Now I showed you that strategy just to provide a little bit of context. I did mention that it was my 27th Parasect run, and this was not my final submission. In the end, I actually chose to go with a more risky strategy, very similar to Van Man's approach throughout this section of the game, and I did that motivated by pure panic. And I'll describe what induced this panic later on in the video. So with that, both of our routes are free of the slog that is the early game, and I think that we should celebrate. So I want to watch some other footage that was submitted to this contest, because not everyone took the traditional speedrunning approach to the game. When I made the Porygon Race video, I challenged people to do a playthrough with only Bide. And yeah, I'm really impressed. You really came through for me, because someone attempted it. Actually, 2 people did. First, let me introduce you to Cronast, who is currently in Agatha's chamber with a real time, of 24 hours and 53 minutes on the clock. He has 905 resets with the moveset Bide, Growth, Mimic, and Rest. So obviously he can't just beat the game with only the move Bide, he does need other moves to support it, but Bide is the only damage dealing move. He's using Rest to heal his Parasect, and Bide to buff up its stats when that's required. Also, I think Mimic to steal things like Hypnosis and stuff like that, occasionally. You're probably thinking, was he even able to defeat Agatha? And the answer is yes. Just after 28 hours and 2 minutes. I can't even fathom how it felt for him to enter Lance's chamber for the first time. By the way, while he was doing this run, he commented in the leaderboard Discord that he was close to getting a sub 30 time, and I honestly started to question my life when I read that, because I was like, how is someone gonna get under 30 minutes? This seems impossible. And then he posted a screenshot, and I understood what he was referring to. So his Parasect actually does beat the game using only Bide to deal damage with a time of 30 hours, 42 minutes, and 44 seconds, with 1,215 resets at level 89. This took 39 hours and 32 minutes of game time. Honestly, it's a little bit weird that the real time and the game time are this close together. That very rarely happens in my videos. That's just because every time you reset, the game time reverts to its previously saved value. And he reset a lot. This is the first time that my overlay's reset counter has had 4 digits. And I have to say, it's pretty cool. Unfortunately for him though, it wasn't the sub 30 time that he wanted, but I think for a run like this, the 43 minutes of time that he was over is basically just a rounding error. So, well done. Here, I should also mention Gigalechu, who decided to do a similar run, and he was actually able to get a significantly better time. He finished the game after just 20 hours, with 486 resets at level 83, with 38 hours and 52 minutes of game time. Well done to both of you. This is true patience. Honestly, I think the reason that Gigalechu was able to clock in with a faster time was his Parasect was nicknamed Joe. Obviously, this is less characters, so that's clearly the differentiating factor. Also, it is key to note that Gigalechu wins here, but his Parasect also faints, so you can make your own decision about if that is actually a valid victory. Alright, that was a great intermission. Let's get back to it and talk about the mid-game. Obviously, no one has problems with Surge, so I'm going to take a moment to check in with all of the splits after he's defeated. Right now, the times are extremely close. There are 4 people with sub 18-minute times: Vanman, Autotonsorialist, Gym Leader Matt, and Ike the Killer. Other players, like me, have times that are just above 18 minutes, so it looks like things are very competitive at this point. Now, let's move on to the mid-game where all players are going to have to make important choices between setup moves as well as their path through the overworld. When I first went into this challenge, I thought that essentially it was going to be a choice between 3 options: Swords Dance, Growth, or both of them together, but that isn't exactly how it works. So let's examine the details. Swords Dance raises the user's attack by 2 stages, effectively doubling it each use. Setting up Parasect's attack is an obvious choice because it's its best stat. Also, the setup comes very quickly because it only takes 3 turns to hit +6. However, in Generation 1, this comes with a big downside. Fewer turns to set up means fewer turns to trigger the badge boost glitch. Just in case you're new, I am going to explain how it works. Every time the player's Pokemon has its stats altered in battle, the game recalculates the badge boosts provided by the badges that the player currently has. Because of a programming oversight, you can compound the 12.5% boost on all of your other stats. Basically, every time your stats are changed, these boosts all just compound on top of themselves. However, there is one exception to this, and that's that the glitch doesn't apply to the primary stat that you're altering. So Swords Dance is correctly recalculating Parasect's attack. So with Swords Dance, players can badge boost Parasect's other stats 3 times in total, which ends up being a boost of about 42%. On the other hand, Growth allows Parasect to boost its special stat, which is both offensive and defensive in Generation 1. It does take 6 turns to get fully set up, which is slower, but that comes with the advantage of badge boosting 6 times. Because these boosts are compounding on top of each other, after 6 badge boosts, Parasect's other stats will have a 202% boost. Honestly, that is much better than the boost that you get with Swords Dance. Now, potentially it is possible to use both Swords Dance and Growth at the same time, giving Parasect a total of 9 badge boosts, which would only apply to its defense and speed stats because we're not recalculating those with a move, and that would give them 288% increases. However, here is where reality comes back to us, because Parasect has to wait to level 48 to learn Growth, whereas it can obtain the Swords Dance TM much earlier on. So the choice branches aren't what I thought they would be. Here's how they play out. Option 1, we can skip Swords Dance altogether. Option 2, we can obtain Swords Dance now and then choose later on if we want to put Growth in its place or keep both Growth and Swords Dance. And honestly, that is really it. But I should say that obtaining Swords Dance early on does possibly mean that the player is going to have to go out of their way to pick it up and then do a little bit of backtracking, which does waste time. As I mentioned before, this really isn't in line with the style that Vanman is going for. He wants perfect efficiency in every leg of the race. So here's how he does it after arriving in Lavender Town. In order to achieve the level required for Parasect in later stages of the game, he's going to have to gain a bit more experience here. So after defeating the mandatory gambler on Route 8, he fights this super nerd who has 3 Pokemon. Now you'll notice here that this doesn't level Parasect up, but don't worry, this fight is actually very important. Next, I want to point out that in Celadon City, he does heal his Parasect, but from here, I want everyone to keep checking in on his PP because things get very tight in the next section of the game. After the heal, he heads straight towards Erica's gym. To save as much time as possible, he is only going to face one trainer in here, the mandatory beauty with Execute. I remember sitting with him and Steve M Plays on a Discord call, and they were discussing which trainers in Erica's gym they would want to ideally face. In the end, Vanman decided to only face this one beauty here, and then face the guy on Route 8 instead. That gives a little bit more optimal levels for less Pokemon to knock out. The reason that he's done this is so his Parasect can level up to exactly level 30 and learn Spore before Erica. By the way, this is the second time in the entire playthrough that Vanman is saving. He's doing this because with so few optional battles, Vanman's Parasect has a disadvantage going into the battle against Erica. Both her Tangela and her Weepinbell outspeed. The first isn't really an issue for him, it can waste your time with a move like Bind, which does unfortunately happen for him. However, after that, Vanman lands Spore and then gets the knockout. Now things get tense here though, because there's a potential for a reset if the Weepinbell gets a critical hit with Acid. In this case, it doesn't, Spore induces sleep, and 2 Leech Lives later he gets the knockout. From here, the battle is completely won because Parasect outspeeds Gloom. So his choice to defeat Erica before going to the department store gives him more money, and that means he can buy 4 Carbos to raise Parasect's speed. However, this isn't quite enough to be moving first against the Ghastly that you have to face on the mandatory Chandler's team in Pokemon Tower. Here, Vanman makes what I consider to be a slightly risky choice by skipping the save in front of her. However, he just needs 2 hits from Leech Life and finishes both of the ghosts off. At the top of the tower, there's of course another small chance for failure, because Jesse and James Arbok can use Glare against Parasect, which ruins its speed and allows Weezing to move first and potentially KO with Sludge. This time though, there's no Glare, so Vanman has cleared the location. Now on Cycling Road, Vanman faces 2 more optional trainers. The biker right by the entrance, and then much further along the route, after grabbing the rare candy and skipping the PP up, he faces this biker who has 5 poison types on his team. Once again, this doesn't level Parasect up, but it provides the perfect amount of experience for things to line up in a little bit. Because after the Safari Zone in Koga's gym, here he only fights the 2 mandatory trainers, and the final Pokemon that he knocks out gives Parasect enough experience to level up to 36. Then, he can use 5 rare candies to take Parasect up to level 41, which is very specific because it gives it exactly 56 speed, which is enough to move first against all of Koga's Venonats. You'll note that later on some players go into this fight with 54 speed, and that's usually because they're running Swords Dance, but without it, 56 speed is very helpful. Because he's ensured the outspeeds, that means he doesn't even need to heal going into this battle, he can just use Spore to inflict sleep, and then once all the Venonats are trapped, Parasect can slowly knock them out with Leech Life, gaining back its health. Now Venomoth can do damage or set up double team, but there's not so much risk here, so Vanman ends up finishing Koga off with a split of 30 minutes and 45 seconds. Now I've been talking a lot about Vanman up until this point in the video, so let's check in with a player that I haven't mentioned very much, Gym Leader Matt. Now I want to spend time focusing on his route because he prioritizes getting Swords Dance in the mid-game, so it's a nice contrast to Vanman's approach. However, it's not just Swords Dance that's different, there are a bunch of small details that are different, and of course I am going to go into them. On Route 8, he only fights the mandatory Gambler, saving some time when compared with Vanman's Super Nerd battle. Now everyone pay attention here, because he makes what I consider to be a radical choice. Instead of going to Erica's gym like Vanman, or taking a much more straightforward approach by going directly to the department store and then Pokemon Tower, he instead decides to go into the Rocket Hideout. With most first stage Pokemon, this is my go-to strategy. You've heard me talk about it many times in the past, but for Parasect, I think that many people will assume that this area is not needed. However, there are a bunch of potential advantages to exploring this area, so let's go through them. Number 1, you have to fight a trainer to gain access to it, which does give you valuable experience. Number 2, there are items which can be sold for a profit, increasing the number of available vitamins to your Pokemon. Number 3, and I think this one is most important, you can obtain an additional rare candy. In this case, Gym Leader Matt skips number 2, leaving behind all of the items, and he simply prioritizes getting the rare candy as fast as possible. The total time that he spent doing this little hideout excursion is 27 seconds. Not bad when it comes with a little bit more experience as well as a whole other level in the form of a rare candy. After that, he heads to Erica's gym and makes a slightly different choice here in terms of the trainers that he fights. In this case, he plays like I would have when I was a kid, cutting down the central tree and fighting the cool trainer behind it. She has 3 mid-stage Pokemon that provide good experience, and they allow Parasect to level up to level 30, giving it Spore before Erica. So going into the gym battle, he has the same problems that Van Man has. Erica can win in the case that Weepinbell gets a critical hit. However, that is the only way she can win, so he defeats her on his first attempt. After that, Gym Leader Matt heads to the department store, grabs Fly, and then gets paralyzed by Jesse and James Arbok in Pokemon Tower, which is not good. Paralysis prevents Dig on the first turn, Arbok uses Leer, Parasect goes underground, and luckily for him, he hits, knocking their second Pokemon out. But he isn't out of the woods yet because James still has Wheezing. Here's the thing though, they don't have good AI, so in this case, he just has to get good luck, and the Wheezing uses Tackle, which doesn't do very much. Parasect hits Spore, and with that, Gym Leader Matt emerges victorious from the tower. No second reset here for him. Access to the Pokeflute allows him to pass through Cycling Road, complete the Safari Zone, and then dig back to Celadon City. Convenient for him, because now he decides to go east to Saffron City. Obviously, he's doing this so he can head to Sylph to pick up Swords Dance, and in this location, he is going to fight 2 trainers. The Rocket with the Machoke, blocking the Carbos and the Rare Candy, and then the mandatory Arbok Rocket, blocking the Card Key. With it, he can obtain Swords Dance and teach it to Parasect in the place of Leech Life. After that, he digs out of Sylph and prioritizes heading to Koga's gym next. You might wonder why he didn't complete Sylph before backtracking, and the reason is pretty simple. Parasect needs the speed boost to move first against the rival's Flareon, so yeah, without it, the rival's just going to be way too difficult and inconsistent. However, this approach does have a significant advantage because Koga is much easier now. The reason is that after using Spore on the first turn and setting up fully with Swords Dance, Parasect can easily sweep. And here I want to talk about something that I very rarely talk about on the channel, but is always in the back of my mind when I'm playing these challenges, and that is the number of turns that you have to take in a fight. So Van Man's fight took 17 turns, while Gym Leader Matt's fight took only 8. That's less than half, and this is largely just because he isn't relying on sleep after the first Venonat. So with this strategy, Gym Leader Matt gets a Koga split of 30 minutes and 29 seconds. He is actually 16 seconds faster than Van Man to this point in the game. Honestly, I think a lot of people actually underestimate the amount of time that you spend in battles, so reducing the time that you spend in battles by having a strategy like this can really pay off. However, of course, there is a third approach, and that's the strategy that I chose to use. Generally, I like consistency, and I wanted to eliminate a bunch of the risks that the former 2 routes have. So here's how I do it. I'm also going to explore the Rocket Hideout, however, I am going to grab more additional items just so I can have more money. I also add 1 additional trainer here just so that Parasect is going to be level 30 before I enter Erica's gym. But that's not the next place that I stop anyways, because I'm going to the department store. That 1 extra trainer and the double-edged TM, which I got from defeating him, gives me enough money to purchase 4 Carbos now, which takes its speed up to 41. Then, inside the Celadon gym, I fight the Beauty close to the central tree. She has 4 Pokemon, all are one-shots with damage from Leech Life. And then, I choose to face the cool trainer that Gym Leader Matt fought. This brings Parasect up to level 31, 1 level higher than both Van Man and Gym Leader Matt, which allows me to use 3 rare candies to boost it to level 34. This means that it now has 46 speed, allowing me to move first against both the Tangela as well as the Weepinbell, and that makes the fight so much more consistent. But the benefits of this approach don't end here, because in Pokemon Tower, Parasect has enough speed to move first against all of the Chandler's Ghastly, eliminating the need for a save and the chance of a reset here. Unfortunately, against Jesse and James, there just isn't a time-conscious way to get Parasect faster than the Arbok, so I could lose here, but luckily for me, in this case, I don't. On my way to the Safari Zone, I stop by the department store and buy 1 more additional Carbos. Then I follow Gym Leader Matt's footsteps, going to Sylph, obtaining Swords Dance, teaching it in the place of Leech Life, and facing Koga with it. This safer mid-game approach does cost me though, because I clock in with a time of 32 minutes and 6 seconds. So I think after explaining those mid-game routes, let's check in with the Koga splits here. Anything that is slower than my time is starting to get into the territory where it just isn't competitive. players like Marcus, Uran10, and Kangastan would need to get flawless results from here, as well as other players having bad luck for a chance to win. Okay, so let's continue. Now as we watch me backtrack to Sylph to fight the rival, I want to chat about a major thing that I picked up when comparing my footage to Gym Leader Matt. Whenever he doesn't need an item, he just completely skips it, and he is very meticulous with this. This is very evident because he skips all of the PP ups, but of course I grab all of them. And I just want to quickly reflect here on how I'm wasting time doing this. So, number 1, I waste time walking up to the item. Number 2, I waste time positioning myself to pick it up because on 4 times speed, sometimes this can be a little bit tricky. Then, I waste time with the dialogue box scrolling. I also waste time opening my inventory to use the item. I waste time finding the item in my inventory, and then I finally waste time using it on Parasect, making sure that I'm going slow enough to choose the right move. So here's a brief PP up supercut of all the time that I spent grabbing these items. It also includes overworld pathing to grab them, that sort of thing. On the right hand side of the screen, you can see the amount of time that it took me to manage these items throughout the playthrough. By the way, I'm very surprised how much it took. I'm considering in all of my future playthroughs minimizing the number of items that I am picking up just to save maybe 20 to 30 seconds per run. Also, in this case, it ends up taking me a total of 32.5 seconds, and in a race this competitive, that is just unacceptable. Okay, so just before we get back to the regular footage, we have something fun to do. Because I glossed over the Safari Zone, and I want to jump into some footage by Adair, because he got lucky enough to spot a rare Chansey. Honestly, it is sort of a nuisance today because we want to be going as fast as possible. Still though, for me it's weird to run away from a Chansey, and I think he felt the same way, so he tries to catch it, and he actually does! There was some brief joking around in the Discord chat about using Chansey because Softboiled is a field move, and it could strategically be used to heal Parasect to skip Pokemon centers, but of course that is not a viable strategy outside of this run. Also, I do want to mention that this Chansey was caught in one of his practice attempts, not his final submission. By the way, this is not actually the last meme-worthy play that he was able to luck into. Well, this one was lucky, the next one is the exact opposite, but we're going to talk about that a little bit further into the race. Now, I keep teasing you saying that we're going to continue, but I actually want to rewind here and show a completely different approach to the mid-game that Speedrunner came up with. He goes to the Celadon gym after the Safari Zone, so he has more Carbos. Also, he fights all of the trainers in here. Yes, every single trainer. When I was reviewing this footage, I was sure that this would significantly delay his time. I just thought that doing extra trainer battles would make him not competitive. However, he goes one step further with his training because he fights all of the trainers in the fighting dojo in Saffron City. After that, he grabs Swords Dance, which should theoretically waste more time, and then he fights an optional trainer on the 10th floor. After all of this experience, he's level 40 before Koga, so he can fight him without using any rare candies and outspeed the first Venonat. Now, this approach does cost him some time here. His Koga split is roughly 1 minute slower than mine. He clocks in with a time of 33 minutes and 5 seconds. But he wasn't taking this approach to make Koga's split faster, he was trying to gain time overall. After the battle is where all of this strategy comes together. Koga's badge allows the player to surf. Being able to surf gives you access to Pokemon Mansion, and on the final floor, in yellow version only, there are level 43 and 46 Raticate. I cannot express to you how awful they are, because they are faster than Parasect. That means that you can fail to run away, get hit by Super Fang or Hyper Fang, and sometimes that means you lose an entire playthrough here. However, because of Speedrunner's planning, he is level 41 after Koga, and he has 5 rare candies. All of these allow him to level up, avoiding the level 43 Raticate entirely with repels. Also, once he collects the 2 rare candies in the mansion, he can level Parasect up to level 48, learning Growth before Blaine. Interestingly enough though, he doesn't do that next because he digs out, and this teleports him back to Saffron City. Here, he takes care of the rival. By the way, with Koga's speed boost, the rival is not a problem, and then after that, he fights Sabrina. Now here, I should mention her and how all of the players are going to have to go up against her. It is essentially a coin flip. There is no way to get Parasect up to 104 speed to move first against the Abra and avoid Flash. Pretty much what all of us eventually ended up agreeing on for Sabrina was the fact that if you get hit by Flash, you should just reset. The reason that this is fairly consistent is that Sabrina can use an X-Defend on turn 1, or her Abra can just miss Flash. After all, this move only has 60% accuracy. Okay, so after he defeats Sabrina, which he does on his first attempt, now it's time to head back to Cinnabar Island. So the experience from those battles means that of all 11 of the fastest players in the race, Speedrunner is going to be at the highest level going into the Blaine fight. that's level 50 in comparison to the more common level 48. Now you might think that having more levels and being over another damage rounding threshold would really help Speedrunner out here, but I actually think that it is a bit of a liability. The issue with this approach is that because he didn't use a rare candy right before the fight, when he knocks the Rapidash out, Parasect levels up and resets its badge boosts. As a result, Arcanine moves first, hits Flamethrower, but Parasect survives because of its growth setup. Now, he would have lost there if Blaine got a critical hit, but in this case, with no critical hit, he's able to win on his first attempt. That gives him a Blaine split of 38 minutes and 33 seconds. But there are of course other approaches here. But before that though, I should mention that Blaine is where the true frustration of Parasect sets in. There is no way to be 100% consistent here against him while maintaining a good time. Now, while he isn't frustrating like the Goldeen Trainer, Rival 2, or any of the other smaller obstacles, he's frustrating because he's very far into the playthrough. You could have a perfect run to this point in the game, and then Blaine just shows up and he's like, hey, I'm gonna use Flamethrower 5 times in a row, and you're just gonna be crushed and have to restart over again. It is here that I should mention the title of the video, because I actually ended up doing over 200 attempts with Parasect. And I know that other people did similar numbers, so yeah, by the time you get to Blaine, I was always just praying that I could get by him, my heart was always racing, and I think that of all of us, Vanman put it best in this message to the Discord group.
Save right next to him, and the instant you see Ninetales used F, hit the reset button. When you see anything else, continue playing.
He is very right. Initially, I thought that Swords Dance would be enough to defeat Blaine, but it turns out that this isn't the right choice because you need more badge boosts to outspeed. So here let's focus on Kangastan's fight against Blaine because he's going in at level 48, and this is basically the standard strategy that we figured out. In this place, he is giving up Swords Dance for growth. Then against Ninetales, it needs to not use Flamethrower on the first turn. It is always a one-hit if it does. Parasect gets Spore, and from there, players are going to need somewhere between 4 and 5 turns of setup to badge boost Parasect's speed above Rapidash's, which is 118. The reason that there are 2 different number of turns required is because everyone routed the mid-game differently, and the number of Carbos really matters. In this case, Kangastan only needs 4 turns of setup, and after that he outspeeds, and so he's able to one-shot everything with Dig. However, there is one more complication in this fight. Against Arcanine, look at what Kangastan does. He uses Spore instead of Dig right away. This is what you have to do if you want to play as safely as possible. Because if Parasect goes underground with Dig and Arcanine sets up Reflect, then there is a chance you will not KO and it will hit a Flamethrower. Also, I do want to note here that his strategy is slightly different because he still has Body Slam on his moveset, and this is pretty good because then he doesn't have to go underground and he actually can knock the Arcanine out even more consistently than other players will later on. So, well played Kangastan, you had the perfect strategy here. Your N10 gets less lucky against Blaine because the Ninetales uses Flamethrower right away, causing a fast and unfortunate reset. Luckily, only one for him. Marcus gets better luck, initially putting the Ninetales to sleep, and this is where I want to talk about yet another way that Blaine can be even more annoying. If the Ninetales wakes up before you complete your badge boosts, then it can move first and get another chance to roll Flamethrower. Unfortunately for Marcus, this is his undoing against Blaine. Of course, this is a completely different class of reset because it wastes much more time than just getting hit by Flamethrower on the first turn. And that really leads me to the fact that all 3 of these players have times that are over 40 minutes at this point, and that is just not going to be competitive anymore. So how many players do we still have in the running? Well, there are 8 left. So will Blaine's carnage continue? Let's see how Vanman's luck is. He's going into the battle around 36 minutes and 20 seconds, which is a fantastic time. Also, he has no resets so far, so this is a very lucky playthrough. Ninetales goes for Tail Whip on the first turn, increasing his luck because this badge boosts his speed. However, Sleep wears off, and Ninetales has a chance to move again. It selects Confuse Ray. Vanman's Parasect luckily moves and gets Spore, then it hits itself twice in a row. I should note here that because of his route, he needs 5 badge boosts. With only 4, he is going to be speed tied with the Rapidash. However, he does manage to get the setup that he needs and continues his perfect resetless playthrough. Okay, so I don't want to spend too much time talking about the other players that are going to clock in here against Blaine. Adair has an unfortunate reset to Flamethrower. He does clock in under 40 minutes though. Zeldafan beats his time by 39 seconds, and here I want to make a comparison with Speedrunner's time of 38 minutes and 33 seconds. Yeah, Zeldafan is 1 second behind Speedrunner. And here, I will mention the time that I got against Blaine, which I think is actually quite good. I get a time of 37 minutes and 13 seconds. And I should note that this is the only 37-minute time that any player gets against Blaine. And that is very bad for me, because there are 4 other players who clock in with times under 37 minutes. So I am still not in the lead. Of course, one of the people ahead of me is Vanman, as we have already seen. But surprisingly, Otto clocks in with a faster time of 36 minutes and 40 seconds. However, significantly faster than both of them is Gym Leader Matt. He gets an incredible sub-36-minute time of 35 minutes and 59 seconds. So here are some of the top performers' splits at Blaine. By the way, the reason the splits list is slowly getting shorter and shorter is because I was not automatically collecting these. So yeah, we had to write every single number down by hand. Now, if you've been really keenly watching all of the splits up until this point, you will notice that I have not talked about one trainer, and that trainer is Ike the Killer. So I think it is time for him to make his official entrance into the video. I have intentionally only mentioned him in passing throughout all other portions of the race. You're probably like, who is this guy? Like, yeah, he's been getting good times, but like he doesn't seem to have been doing anything notable. And that's because I had to save for this very moment his notable contribution to the race. So now let's catch up with the behind the scenes of the race and talk about the server dynamics that were developing about 1 week out from the deadline. At this point, Ike had posted some of his times on the leaderboard, but when I reviewed them, I didn't think they were particularly noteworthy. Definitely, he wasn't a player that I was worrying about in my competitive frenzy. Obviously, my attention was on Vanman as well as Speedrunner. I was getting times that were very close to them, but not quite as good, and I thought that I really had a chance. Now here, I want to take us back to way earlier in the video. Remember how I said that Vanman was helping people set up rapid fire or turbo keys? Well, 1 week away from the deadline, Ike responded. Here's what he wrote.
I know this may be a silly question, but turbo mode doesn't give you that much speed, right?
Honestly, this is a pretty fair question, and it's one I've always asked myself. I do use turbo in my playthroughs because I have terrible RSI in my wrists from music performance, and if I have to repeatedly press a button over and over again, the RSI gets much worse, and I'm just not able to play more than like 1 or 2 playthroughs every week. However, I'm sure that you can guess the answer to his question. So Ike enabled his turbo mode keys, fired up his stream, I watched along, and he clocked in with a ridiculously good time. 46 minutes and 59 seconds. I cannot state how much this made me panic. This was a better time than the best time that I had posted so far, and it was better than almost everyone else's results. And Ike just casually changed a setting on his controller and got it. He didn't even have to play multiple attempts. So now we're going to do a little time warp and head back earlier into Ike's footage, because I want to talk about the pure meltdown that happened in the Discord server as he posted these results. I've explained how Vanman was relentless to get perfect play. He spent whole days just trying to get by the second gym. I've also explained how I took a much safer approach, trying to complete as many runs as possible to get an early edge on the competition, posting a good time. But that safety didn't pay off for me, and Vanman's drive for perfection also didn't end up paying off for him, at least to this point. Because while he spent so many hours trying to get through Cerulean City on Twitch, he finally submitted a final time which he thought was very good, and then Ike just showed up and got a better time. And here, I just want to note how hopeless this felt, because Ike would just show up casually, stream once or twice every day. Each time, he would clock in with another personal best and completely crush everyone else's results. It is an understatement to say that this fueled the competitive spirit in me as well as everyone else. I quite literally showed up to every single stream that Ike did and took notes. It turned out that he was playing a route that is very similar to the Vanman route. However, some way it just works every time he does it. Every stream isn't like 8 hours long, he just gets by Cerulean and completes maybe 2 to 3 runs, with at least one of them being a personal best. Now I mentioned before that Vanman had already submitted a run to me, but seeing his route in the hands of Ike brought him back out of retirement to spend an entire other weekend trying to shave off time from his Parasect run. However, I should really state that we do not want to underestimate Ike. I really think that Gym Leader Matt got the feeling of hopelessness that we all had started to feel by this point seeing Ike's results. Honestly, in my desperation, I bought 2 new controllers to see if they would give me an input speed improvement. I also tried new software for TurboFire to improve my rate. I also considered if maybe Ike might be cheating and running the game at a slightly faster speed than everyone else, maybe like 4.1 times game speed. I compared his stream VODs frame by frame to my footage, and no, he is not playing at a faster speed. He is just doing something miraculous. So how is he making miracles happen? Using Vanman's base gameplay, he made a few small tweaks for consistency. For example, he would be saving in front of the Goldeen Trainer as well as Rival 2. If he had like one reset here, he would just keep playing and try and get a completed run. It's essentially a blend of Vanman's high-risk, high-reward strategy and then the philosophy of my more consistent approach. And using this in the middle route is really giving him good results. Now, as you will have noticed watching the footage, he did get one reset on the Rival on Nugget Bridge. However, after that, he has no more resets until he reaches Blaine. So how will his Blaine attempt go? There is no Flamethrower, Spore works, and Ninetales snoozes, letting him set up with 6 growths. Because he's playing the Vanman route, he doesn't have Body Slam, so after sporing the Arcanine, he uses Dig and gets the knockout. So let's check in with all of the Blaine splits. Of the top 8, Adair is the only one with a time over 39 minutes, and that just isn't fast enough now. Both Zeldafan and Speedrunner are barely holding on, only with 38.5 minute times. I'm just over 37 minutes. Vanman, Otto, and Ike are all in the high 36 minutes, and Gym Leader Matt is setting an absolutely fantastic pace under 36 minutes. So will any of our players have fissure resets against Giovanni? That is essentially the only way to lose in this fight. Now, I already mentioned that Adair's time is not going to be competitive, and unfortunately for him, he is the only player that succumbs to Giovanni. The rival battle on Route 22 really isn't an issue for anyone. I want to note here that there isn't a lot of potential for these players to gain back lost time now, unless something goes really wrong in one of the playthroughs. As a result, both Zeldafan and Speedrunner aren't going to be able to catch up to the people with the top times. That does mean that today our defending champion is going to be unseated. Because none of the top 5 had resets on Giovanni, and because the rival on Route 22 is fairly straightforward, the standings do not change coming out of this split. However, the next location of the game actually presents a threat for Parasect, so let's talk about it. The place I'm referring to is Route 23. I very rarely mention this place. There are no encounters in the water and only 2 patches of grass that are mandatory to walk through. Sometimes you get really unlucky in a run and get 1 Pokemon here, and that's what happens for Adair in one of his earlier playthroughs. And the wild Pokemon that shows up is Fearow. This is a problem for Parasect because it outspeeds, and it also knows the move Drill Peck, which does 4 times damage. Yeah, it knocks Adair's Parasect out, and of course he did not save anywhere close to here. So when he reported this incident to the Discord, it honestly just increased the anxiety for everyone, because now you can get a random encounter that just ends your run this far into the game. So let's check in with the top 5 and see how they manage this. I just take my chances with the grass and luckily do not get an encounter. Gym Leader Matt does the same, also not getting an encounter, and same with Otto. Vanman chooses to repel all the way before the rival on Route 22, which lasts long enough to prevent the encounter on Route 23. Ike notably takes a different approach, using a super repel right before the small patch, which then has the advantage of still applying once he enters the cave. So while the players make their way through Victory Road, let's talk about some more novelty runs that were submitted. Feller submitted a run where after every gym leader, he would complete a Rubik's Cube as fast as possible and then continue with the playthrough, which I think is a really fun idea. Unfortunately, he didn't have enough time to finish his attempt, but I figured that it was still fun to include here. Ray completed a run where Parasect took no damage throughout the playthrough. Yes, a damageless Parasect run. For this, they used Game Hook to set Parasect's HP and max HP to 1, so if it ever took damage, it would just get knocked out or black out. And I figured that this was going to be absolutely hellish, perhaps as bad as the Bide run, but it turns out this took just over 4 hours and 13 minutes to complete, with only 50 resets. And now that I think about it, that makes sense, because once Parasect gets enough speed, then it can just move first against everything and induce sleep with Spore. Now earlier I mentioned when Cronast reported that he was trying to get a sub 30 time, and we were all like, what, that isn't possible. Well, someone posted a result that was around 30 minutes, and I just remember being absolutely floored, but this turned out to be a tool-assisted speed run. King of Toast was actually nice enough to sit down with me on Discord and show me how he did it, in case I ever wanted to do a tool-assisted tool-assisted run in the future, so maybe I'll do something like that on the channel later on. I think the most interesting thing about this tool-assisted run is just the fact that the strategy and the dynamics of the playthrough completely change. What he told me was that if you're struggling with a fight, you can just wait till the proper frame so that the enemy gets a Generation 1 miss, or so that your Pokemon gets a key critical hit. And honestly, that is why he was able to clock in with such an amazing time. Okay, so here we are, we have reached the finale of the novelty runs, and for this one, I am just gonna let him describe to you exactly what he's doing. Alright, take it away.
Pokemon Yellow, Parasect only, voice commands only, voice commands derived from various sea shanties.
Now, the thing that I absolutely love about this run is that it is so creative, and it is also hilarious listening to him say aye over and over and over again just to press A. Now, he started this run off with just a simple green screen with his head floating down in the bottom right, but then later on in the run, he took the extremely creative choice to put a virtual background behind himself, which is basically like a tropical beach with some boats on the water. Ah, this is a touch that I absolutely love. And at long last, here is the moment, because he is able to defeat the champion using only voice commands derived from sea shanty lyrics.
I, up, aye. We did it! We did it!
Yes, you did. Congratulations. In this case, it took him 5 hours, 46 minutes, and 36 seconds. Surprisingly, only 19 resets, and he completed the game at level 64. Honestly, all of these novelty runs really make me excited, because I think that people are going to come up with more awesome creative options for the next race. But now, let's get back to the main race event and see how our competitors do against the Elite Four. Lorelei is straightforward, but it's still not 100% consistent. There are two ways to lose. First, Dugong outspeeds with 89 speed, and that allows it to use Aurora Beam. Parasect can tank this hit as long as it isn't a crit. After that, once Spore has been established, things get much more straightforward. Set up Growth and then Sweep. That leads us to our second way to lose though. If Parasect gets a critical hit, it bypasses our stat boosts from Growth, and that will cause it to not one-hit Lorelei's remaining Pokemon. In those cases, she'll have a chance to either crit or freeze. For the top 5, all make it through the fight without any of these situations occurring, and the rankings stay unchanged. Now, I really don't like to talk about the hiker who is in the next room. There really isn't a way to fail this fight unless you get extremely bad luck. For example, you could crit the Machamp and run out of PP. This actually happened to Vanman during one of his attempts, and I have to apologize to all of you who are viewing this video because the production of it took so long and was such a mess that this footage has unfortunately been lost to time. Of course, in all of the final submitted runs for these players, no one loses here. I do want to note though that there are small differences to the approaches that players took. Vanman, for example, sets up to +6 with Growth before sweeping, whereas Otto only sets up to +3 before sweeping. This actually widens the time gap between the two of them. So this fight did actually have an impact. Now let's talk about Agatha. Before this fight, everyone is going to use one rare candy. It's used to ensure that Parasect is going to get the outspeed after all of its setup and maintain that without leveling up during the fight. With Dig, it's easy to finish off all of her ghosts as well as her Arbok. The real nuisance here is how long the Golbat takes to defeat when the only damage dealing move we have is Mega Drain. Here, I should mention that the strategies have completely converged and we're all at the same level using the same strategy. By the way, there was talk in the Discord server after the submission date that Solar Beam actually might be the better choice for this fight. I didn't know this before, but it takes less frames than Mega Drain, likely because of the healing time that Mega Drain has each turn. Also, it would provide better damage against the Golbat and maybe speed the results up just a little bit. However, like I said, this information came out after the deadline had hit, so none of us were able to test it out or utilize this strategy. Alright, so we've all reached Lance, and the rankings have not changed. I am still in 5th place. That is not what I was hoping for coming into this race. However, is Lance potentially a place where players could get resets and have their runs fall apart, giving me the advantage that I need? Well, the answer is essentially no. Gyarados could cause resets here if it gets a critical hit with Hyper Beam, but that is the only loss condition, and it's so unlikely because Gyarados can also use Dragon Rage and Leer. I'll note here that the reason that all of our playthroughs have converged in terms of level and moveset is basically because we all have to face the exact same league, they come in a fixed order, and we all need specific strategies to beat them. In this case, our level has been meticulously planned out so that once Parasect gets full setup, it has just enough speed to move first against the Aerodactyl. In this case, it has 173 speed, giving it the first move, and because of that, we are all able to defeat Lance and make it to the champion. Now, there are risks in this battle, and I'm going to talk about them in a second. Instead, while my champion footage plays, I want to say that I put everything that I had into this race. I will reiterate that I wanted nothing more than to win. I started 200 runs, most of them ended around Cerulean City, but many, especially in the early days, were full attempts that were like 50 minutes long. So here I am, against the champion. I use Earthquake on the Flareon and clock in with the final time of 46 minutes and 54 seconds. This was my first and only time under 47 minutes. And with it complete, I had run out of time to do more attempts. So that's my run. It's the best one that I was capable of doing. I'll rank Parasect now based on this finish time of 46 minutes and 54 seconds, so today it earns itself a spot in the A tier. It was actually 2 seconds faster than Ninetales, but since I used more risky strategies with it, I think that it deserves to be placed behind Ninetales. After all, I also did way more attempts than I did with the fire type. Now I want to step away from the race for a moment and just talk about the production of this video, because I promise that it is relevant. Now that it is almost a year after the race finished, I am left wondering if this format is something that I want to continue hosting. The process of refining and playing Parasect was honestly a month of hell. There were honestly so many problems getting the other people set up with software. This caused me to burn out after playing the final Parasect run, and I really just never wanted to look at this zombie mushroom bug ever again. I thought I'd take a month off, clear my mind, and come back when I had more energy. My initial intention was to release it late September 2022, or in October if I had fallen behind. But the production obviously stalled and turned into prolonged procrastination. Just before hosting the Parasect Race in May 2022, I had decided to release a video every day in December, and I had so many videos planned as a part of Halloween week at the end of October that I ended up missing the September deadline that I was shooting for with Parasect, and then because of December, the production stalled all the way into January 2022. However, when my time finally did free up and I returned to the project in early 2023, I just didn't have the memory for the material or the drive to really get back into it again. Plus, because so many people had submitted awesome runs, I felt like this video had to be something truly exceptional. It is an understatement to say that this made my procrastination even worse. It was at this low point that I almost considered canceling this project altogether in order to preserve my mental health. The burden of thinking about it every day was just so great. However, in my despair, something that my fiance had said to me back when I was competing in the race came back into my mind. I had been going on about how I just really needed to win the race and how I was working so hard to make sure that I got the time that I wanted. She turned to me and she simply said, "Wouldn't it be weird if you won the race that you're hosting for the community?" That sentence didn't really sink in with me until these last few weeks. So this is my final time, and it is a good time. Actually, I think it is an excellent time, but it was not enough to win the race. And honestly, that's perfect. I may have started this journey wanting to prove myself and achieve the best time, but at the other end, I've realized that it's really not about winning, it is about community. These races are really about bringing people together to play a 20-year-old game because we all love it. So I have decided to host another community solo challenge race. This one is going to be a lot different because I learned so much from the process of Parasect, and if you're interested in being a part of it, hang around till the end of the video. By the way, I think the metaphor for the Parasect video is it feels like Quilladin. The Porygon race is like the cute first stage Pokemon that's really novel and you're like, oh, I wonder what this format is going to turn into. And then the Parasect race is like this weird middle evolution that's going through its awkward teenage years. And the hope is that eventually it will evolve into some awesome final form. I do have to say, I'm not a huge fan of Chestnut. Anyways, I'm hoping that this race format in my third iteration is going to turn into something truly special. Definitely not Chestnut, so maybe not the perfect metaphor. For now though, we've got 4 incredible competitors who all have a chance of getting the fastest time with Parasect, so let's start with Van Man. I'm going to narrate this champion fight so you can understand the intricacies of it. First, Spore and then Growth are used on Sandslash to set up to +5. The first Growth is needed to outspeed, and after that it is safe to set up and mimic Earthquake. Here I should mention that there is a risk of being poisoned. If that happens, you lose a lot of time because the poison animation plays displays each turn while you set up growth. And the players do need to get to +5 so that they have enough speed to move first against the Alakazam and knock it out with a single Earthquake. Executor isn't an issue, it's just annoying and slow. Following that, this is the key moment of the fight because Parasect levels up going into the Magneton. This is why Vanman didn't finish his growth setups, because now he can use the final one to boost Parasect's speed one more time. This is safe to do against the Magneton because Parasect's typing. It's only going to use Screech or Swift, and then you can use Earthquake or Mega Drain to finish it off and move on to the Cloyster. The previous growth setup was to ensure that Parasect moves first here, preventing Cloyster from critting or freezing. After that, Flareon is a simple one-hit and Vanman finishes the game. He clocks in with an incredible time of 46 minutes and 33 seconds. Okay, so how will Otto do? Because he's going into this fight ahead of Vanman. While his footage plays out, I want to mention something very interesting about his approach to refining Parasect. Instead of using save states to test, or backing up save files, or developing a spreadsheet to help with experience optimization, Otto quite literally programmed a piece of software that would do all of these things automatically for him. Yes, this is in fact the origin story of what I now refer to as RBY-XP Router. It's a software that is now available for all of you to download, and it can be connected to GameHook and transcribe your entire playthrough in real time. It calculates damage ranges, experience optimization, and it allows you to very quickly test and optimize Pokemon. Over the last year, Otto has improved this software a lot to make it more powerful than its initial incarnation that he had available for this race, but using the first build of it, he is able to clock in with a time of 46 minutes and 3 seconds. That is 30 seconds faster than Vanman. So, there are only 2 players left. Gym Leader Matt is currently in the lead, but Ike the Killer is not far behind. For dramatic effect, let's show both of their footage on screen at the same time. In the top left is Gym Leader Matt, and in the bottom right is Ike the Killer. Now, the Sandslash wakes up a couple of times for both of them, but the key difference early on in the fight is the fact that Gym Leader Matt's first Mega Drain gets a critical hit. So, Ike the Killer is moving on to Alakazam a little bit faster. However, the delays for Gym Leader Matt keep stacking up because the champion uses a full restore. This is only because he got a critical hit, and because the champion's AI rolled for the full restore, which is not guaranteed like it is in a Generation 3 game. By the time Matt finishes off the Sandslash, Ike is already fighting the Executor. And here is a small flaw in Gym Leader Matt's routing. His Parasect only has 156 speed when going up against the Alakazam. That means they are speed tied, allowing the champion to waste more time by selecting Psychic. And it gets a critical hit, finishing Matt's Parasect off. Save states are banned, so he's got to reset. Now, Ike has to remember to use his 6th growth on the Magneton here, or the Cloyster could end this. By the way, I forgot this growth more times than I want to mention. Ike is a better player than I am, though. He doesn't forget, finishes the Cloyster off, moves on to the Flareon before Matt has defeated the Sandslash in his next fight. Earthquake gets the KO, and we have ourselves a champion. Ike the Killer finishes Pokemon Yellow with only a Parasect in 45 minutes and 20 seconds. So, after a year-long wait, he finally gets to know that he won this competition. Congratulations, Ike. You had an incredible run and really pushed all of us to make our play better. Gym Leader Matt also gets a fantastic time though, 45 minutes and 55 seconds. And it is enough to earn him 2nd place and the only other 45-minute time. Otto Tonsorialist takes 3rd place and developed an incredible piece of software in the process, plus his time of 46 minutes and 3 seconds is only 8 seconds behind Gym Leader Matt. Thank you so much to everyone who participated. It is awesome having so many people playing these old games in such a vibrant community. Thank you so much. So that is it for the Parasect Race. For all the viewers, I really appreciate you getting through this monstrosity. I also took my sweet time to finish it. I hope the wait was worth it, although I'm not sure if this is a good video or not. It's just the video that I needed to make. Anyways, I think it is time to move on to the next race, because this one is going to be a lot better. And it starts today. Yes, today. It's only going to run for 4 days until Sunday, July 23rd, so if you want to participate, get in on it this weekend. And I think now it is time to announce the Pokemon that we are going to be doing next. Once again, this is going to be a run in Pokemon Yellow, and the Pokemon is not going to be one of the original 151. We are doing a backport race with Smeargle. Yes, This is possible, and no, I do not need to distribute a ROM file to do it. You can find links in the Premiere chat, the video description if you refresh the video, and on my Twitter as well as on a YouTube post. Head over to Discord to get set up and participate. Also, for this race, I've made a lot of technical improvements, so things are going to be far less challenging and time-consuming for you to set up. I've made a video setup guide, and it is less than 10 minutes long, which is not the hour-long setup guide that I had to make for Parasect. There is literally only one zip file you need to download, and it contains everything you need, all of the software, except for the Pokemon Yellow ROM, which you obviously need to provide yourself. Also, it is key to note that I want these races to be a way for a bunch of people to get into the old Pokemon games together and have a great time. If you want to play with a meme strategy, do it. I want to talk about what you did in the video. If you want to just play a single run and submit it, that's also perfect too. I'd rather have a lot of people participating and all having a great time than just having like 5 people vying for the absolute best times. After all, that's basically the main thing that I learned while playing Parasect. It's not about winning. It's about the mushroom that's controlling my brain and forcing me to run more race events for the Pokemon community. Anyways, jokes aside, I can't wait to play more Pokemon alongside a bunch of you. See you over on Discord.